Good evening, Spice fans, and all of those around the universe who are tuning in with us today. My name is Ashley, and this is my co-host, Kevin.
Hiya.
So how we all doing tonight? Hopefully everybody's feeling good with that Kwisatz Haderach mentality. So, you ready, Kevin?
Let's get the spice flowing.
All right. Tonight we are looking at the first 3 chapters of Dune, according to my Ace science fiction copy from the 1990s. It is considered science fiction's supreme masterpiece. So before we begin, considering we've read through this, do you have any questions that are really on your mind?
I do, actually, since we have seen all the movies, the 1984 version, the miniseries, and then we watched the Dune Part 1 and Part 2 movies. My questions are, what is the main difference? Who is your favorite when it comes to Paul Atreides? Who do you think is the best adaptation of him?
Okay, so if you're talking as far as book adaptation, I have to go with Kyle MacLachlan. He's the one who played in David Lynch's Dune 1984 as Paul Atreides. I thought that he was amazing. He was poised. He was very reliable as a character. You could really feel where Paul Atreides began and Kyle MacLachlan as an actor ended. He really embodied the role. But I have to say, based on my thoughts of the book, Paul in Dune is portrayed as a 15-year-old boy. Now, who do you think best portrayed a 15-year-old boy suddenly becoming this controller of a whole planet, which we'll get into this, but this is something that we've been thinking about for a while now. So considering we haven't read the book really before and you've seen the movies, you know the plot points and you know all the devices that are going on, but you really haven't done a comparison of the movies to the book.
No, I haven't, but in my humble opinion, I would have to say the miniseries version of Paul Atreides is my overall favorite, just because his character seems to be very childlike, that he doesn't seem as though that he's ready to become, to take over in his father's footsteps. He doesn't know exactly what to expect. He just wants to, to be a kid.
So you like the Canadian actor Paul Newman?
Yes.
I thought, was great. The one thing I notice about most Dune podcasts is they dive directly into the books, but they don't dive directly into the actors themselves and how you see them on screen versus how you imagine them in the books. And that's what the point of this podcast is.
Exactly, and that's what we're here to do, is to compare and contrast not only the characters in the books, but versus the movies and versus the miniseries as well. So that's what we want our listeners to know about. And there is a comment section for all our listeners out there that you can write into us and let us know your opinions. Which characters do you want us to follow in future episodes? What characters do you want us to cover, I should say?
No, actually following the characters, their development between the books versus the movies is a great way of putting it. That's very smart.
Oh, thank you. So I would have to say then, I've read the first 3 chapters of the book. And for a layman like myself, when it comes to, I've seen the movies, I've seen the miniseries, but when it comes to the books, it's a whole new different world that you're looking at at Dune versus what you see on the big screen or on television. And this helps not only our veteran followers of Dune and newcomers. If you're just getting into Dune, this is the place that you want to tune into every Sunday night, and we want to help you out. So I've got a ton of questions. I know Ashley's got a ton of questions. That's what we're going to be doing right now.
So let's start off with chapter 1. Now, we've seen in the miniseries that in Dune 2000, 2003, I think, was when the science fiction miniseries came out on Sci-Fi Channel.
I believe so.
So we see that they're about ready to depart for this planet called Arrakis, Dune. It's called the desert planet, right? And that obviously makes complete sense, going from one environment to another. But you wonder, why did this all begin? Why did it all begin? What was going on through Paul's mind? And the one thing I noticed besides 1984's version is that you really didn't get that inner working of the character's mind. You didn't get to understand their inward feelings. With the book, right from the beginning, you get Paul's feelings. It says, in the week before they were going to Arrakis, everything had reached this unbearable frenzy, and then all of a sudden this old woman comes to visit. Now we see in Dune 1984 exactly how it falls apart in the books, how it all lays out so nice and easily. She's right there in the beginning, telling him everything that he's going to experience. And did you notice that was that way in the book?
Versus the 1984 version, yes, but I don't think it was as close. The book wasn't as close as, I believe, compared the miniseries and the movies. Definitely 1984, in my opinion, stayed true to the book.
Right. The one thing I noticed about the Dune 2003 miniseries was that it took place right from the beginning. It took place on this spaceship, right? And the spaceship's called the Highliner. And they're getting ready to go from one planet to the other. You have this planet Caladan, which for all intents and purposes, when you look at the miniseries, it's like, oh, okay, this is a nice watery world. But it didn't give you that sense of expansion the way it did in 1984. Do you remember watching David Lynch's version?
Right. Right, because the miniseries was more or less of, okay, here's the planet Caladan, and now all of a sudden they're leaving their planet and going to this other planet, Arrakis, also known as Dune. So, okay, what's the deal here? Why? And that's what we're going to dive into tonight is why.
So, in the beginning, we have this woman who's coming to see this boy, Paul Atreides. He's 15 years old in the books. We know that Kyle MacLachlan and Paul Newman, he appeared a bit older, but in the books he's described as being this 15-year-old scrawny teenager who, while he's had some fighting and training experience, really isn't prepared to step into the role of being an heir to a family house. And we notice this old woman comes for some reason, and it's like, what are they looking for? And she says, he's awake and listening to us, and that he is some sort of this little rascal, like he's this little kid who's up out of bed and shouldn't be listening to us.
But isn't that what all kids do anyhow? They want to know what's going on. They want to try and sneak around, and try to listen in and try to pretend, even though that they're pretending that they're sleeping. Right.
It's like, he's like, who is this old woman who suddenly comes into my house, who's sitting there watching me while I'm falling asleep? I mean, this is kind of odd.
Yeah, that's kind of creepy, having an old lady come into your house, talking to your mother about, you being a rascal, and you're sleeping there. You're hearing her talking about, is he the one you should have, you shouldn't have had him and such. And you're like, wait, whoa, where is this all coming from?
Right. Within the first 3 chapters, we learned something that apparently they're looking for this person known as the Kwisatz Haderach. Right. And Paul's like, what is a Kwisatz Haderach? What is this thing that she's talking about called a Gom Jabbar? What are these things? Are they something I need to know about Arrakis before we get there? What did you think about hearing these words and seeing them for the first time after seeing all of the info that you saw with the miniseries and the movies? Like, what did you think about it reading the book?
I put myself right into Paul's mindset of, okay, wait a minute, and what is this test? And we're going to get into that as well. What is this test that she's talking about? That I'm not going to have a choice but to go through this test. Am I going to pass this test? Am I going to fail it? What happens if I fail? What happens if I pass it?
Yeah, what is the point of this whole test? I mean, they really don't tell you right from the beginning. She's just got saying, you're going to be needing to prepare for my Gom Jabbar. You'll need all your faculties tomorrow to meet the Gom Jabbar. And all of a sudden, she just goes away. And he spends the rest of the night sitting there contemplating, what is this? What is going on with this desert planet? And he thinks back to a conversation with another character named Tufir Hawat, his father's master of assassins, So you're getting the sense that this life is a very dangerous life, right? Like, this life is very confusing. And then all of a sudden he's got this old lady talking about this Gom Jabbar, this Kwisatz Haderach, talking about all this stuff. And he's just thinking, I've got this dangerous thing going on to the point where my father needs to have a master of assassins in his house. And now we're getting ready to leave my home planet for 26 generations and go across the universe to another planet that's supposedly devoid and barren of almost all life and water. What?
That's just a mind screw with you, if you think about it. And I'm sure our listeners can relate to this as well. You're thinking, okay, all you've known your entire life is one planet. This is your home world. This is where you've grown up. This is where your ancestors have grown up. And now you're being volunteered that
to do it.
You got to leave and go to a completely strange planet that you know nothing about. You don't know why you're getting there.
Yeah,
but we're going to find out.
You're just placed there. So, first of all, let's go back to the test. So we find out that he's been trained in the secret way, right? By his mother, Lady Jessica, a Bene Gesserit concubine. Now, what did you think of this when you heard that there's this secret organization called the Bene Gesserit? What went through your mind?
The first thing that came to my mind was, okay, is he being indoctrinated into some cult? Is this, a space witch? That is, what's up with the space witch? Why is she here? Am I being taken away from my family? What's happening?
Right, exactly. And we find out that, no, you're not going to be taken away from your family, but you've been trained in something you should not have been trained in. Most men aren't trained in this. So we learned this old woman is named the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, and she is a truthsayer to the head of their Imperium, the Emperor, Shaddam IV. Okay, so there have been so many other emperors, and this Imperium has gone on for 100,000 years or so on and so forth. Because this doesn't take place in the medieval past. You got that, right?
Right.
it takes place in the future, because we have spaceships, we have all of these things that evidence, okay, this is taking place in the future. It says that it takes place in the year 10,191. And yet, does it or does it not feel like a feudal society? I mean, you've got dukes, you've got emperors, you've got master of assassins, you've got the secret organization known as the Bene Gesserit. I mean, does this feel like it's taking place in the future in reality, or does it feel very medieval?
It feels a little bit of both, actually, if you think about it, because you're right. You have all the characteristics of medieval times, of the dark times, of kings, queens, dukes, princes, princesses, courts being held, but then you have the futuristic part of it where they're talking about spaceships and all. So it's almost like this is really going to make for a good sci-fi flick.
Right. And you're sitting there, and it doesn't tell you everything right from the get-go. It sort of gives you a little bit of information and then makes you have to guess, well, what do you think's going to happen next? Like, it doesn't tell you who the Bene Gesserit are, and you were saying space nuns. That's a great way to put it.
Space nuns, space witches.
Space witches, space nuns.
That's another good way of putting it too. Okay, if you look at it as space nuns, okay, is he being pushed towards some religious organization? We don't know this yet.
And that's the question. What is going on here? What is this organization that is testing me? So now we have the Reverend Mother Gaius Helemohiam, the Emperor's truthsayer, who's come down to the planet Caladan before they leave Arrakis, to go to Arrakis, and she says, I've got to give you this test. So he's very confused, and he's like, Mom, what's going on? What is this test? And she's like, just remember that you're a duke's son. You're going to find out about it soon enough. She's not allowed to tell him any information. He's just like, all right, I'm going in here blind. And she pulls out this box, right? When he goes into his mother's study room, she uses this command on him, and then she pulls out this box. Now, what do you think about this command, this come here, and all of a sudden he just obeys?
All of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, who are you? Why are you here? And what makes you think you can command me? And yes, I know I'm saying it in the first person, but you want to put yourself in the mindset of the character, of Paul. And it's like, wait a minute. You want me to come over there? I don't even know you, lady. And you want me to obey you? And that's where, if you've read the book and you've watched all the movies, 1984, the miniseries, and Dune Part 1 and 2, you'll notice there is a difference where, at first he's hesitant in some aspects, but in other aspects, he just obeys without question.
Right. You see, the one thing I noticed about Dune 1984 is that when she she says, come here, he responded. He obeyed pretty quickly because it acted as though it was an unconscious mechanism. What's one thing you noticed in the books? Did you notice that was the same thing?
I believe it was the same in the book, because with the 1984 version, because that was the closest. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was the miniseries where he says, no, I'm just going to stand here. How dare you speak to me that way? But in actuality, he said, wait a minute, she's using the voice on me? No.
So the miniseries, the one thing I liked about the miniseries with Newman was that he actually uses the voice against the Reverend Mother. He goes, "Why don't you tell me?" When she's asking him about his dreams and tells him to obey her, he gives resistance. He gives a fight back.
He challenges her because she's like, I'm telling you, I know all this stuff about you. And he says, okay, in his own words of, why don't you tell me? It's almost like, all right, you claim to know all this stuff about me. Tell me. Tell me what you know.
Right.
Tell me what you know about my dreams.
So now she's pulled this box out of her robes, and it's this 15 centimeter by 15 centimeter size box, and one side has a hole in it. And she says to put your hand in the box. Would you, do you think, put your hand in the box?
I would be hesitant, and I don't know about you viewers out there, but raise of hand here if you would just, without question, you know what? Let's see what it is. Let's see what could possibly go wrong here, and just stick your hand in the box without hesitation. I want to know. But for me personally, I would be hesitant, but then I'd be like, you know what? Curiosity is getting the better of me.
But the one way I like that Frank Herbert describes it here, roughly on page 7 of my copy of the Ace Science Fiction Dune 25th Anniversary novel, she basically tells him, put your hand in the box, and you're wondering, is she using the voice again? Because he says slowly he feels the compulsions and he's unable to inhibit them, so he puts his hand in the box.
It's almost as if something else is controlling him to put his hand in the box, that he's not controlling himself.
Right. Is she still using the voice on him or not?
Right. Has he lost control of his faculty, so to speak, for that moment?
So all of a sudden, she then pulls out this needle, and she goes and she holds it up at the right side of his neck. And he starts to look, and she yells, using the voice again, "Stop. I hold at your neck the Gom Jabbar." And then she explains it's the needle with the drop of poison on its tip, and she says, "Don't pull away or you'll feel that poison." Now, how in the world is this a test?
I can't see how this is a fair test, because then she's saying, you got your hand in the box. Keep your hand in the box, deal with all the pain, and make it through. You pull your hand out of the box, you die. I can't see how this is a fair test. So I'm going to put my hand in this box. If I take it out, I die because you're going to stab me in the neck. But if I keep my hand in the box, I'm going to feel excruciating pain, and I don't know whether or not I'm going to live or die. I really don't have much of a choice here.
Right. But then again, you think about it. Do you really have a choice whether or not to experience pain that could be catastrophic in real life?
Yes, you do have that choice, but then do you choose the excruciating pain, or do you choose death? Because you don't know if this pain is going to lead to death, but you know that that needle is going to lead to death. So which is the lesser of the two evils?
Right. But she says, you've heard of an animal chewing a leg off to escape a trap. A human stays in the trap to endure the pain and fake death so that he could kill the trapper and remove a threat.
Well, yeah, in that case, if you're comparing she's trying to see if he's human. So if you're comparing the human mindset versus an animal mindset, of course, the animal is going to do, it's a fight or flight instinct that's going to kick in. With the animal, it's all right, it's going to do what it's got to do to survive. But then the human mindset comes into play and says, okay, it's a little bit more complicated than the fight or flight instinct. I need to control myself here.
And how do you overcome that fight or flight instinct? Do you endure the pain, or do you say, I can't do this anymore, and try and run away?
You try to call her bluff. In my mind, call the bluff, and endure the pain and see what happens.
So how does a person endure the pain in Paul's case? What do you think Paul does?
Blocks it out. Just what his instinct then will kick in of his training as a child that he didn't realize he was being trained in, as his mother tells him, just stay focused.
Right. His mother's trained him to be able to control his mind and his body. His mother's able to control and has taught Paul how to control everything all the way down to a basic cellular level to control conscious and unconscious bodily reactions and actions.
So you can almost compare him to the way that Shaolin monks are trained from toddlers all the way up to adulthood.
That is a great way of putting how the Bene Gesserit train themselves. They have a specific action that they can do that other people can't do, controlling all the fibers and nerves of their muscles, controlling their basic instincts, controlling all of the inner and outer turmoil that may come in, or distraction that may come in that could potentially put you into danger. And they're creating themselves to be almost weapon-like. So Shaolin monks actually is a perfect analogy in my mind.
Okay, then. So, for all intents and purposes, Paul Atreides is a Shaolin monk in training.
Right. He's sort of like this Shaolin, so to speak, characterized person. And that, I think, has to do with a lot of Frank Herbert's influences on the novel. He was influenced by Buddhist monks and Zen religion.
And you have to remember the time frame, too, that Frank Herbert wrote this book. What was going on in the world at that time? What were his influences? He said in interviews, he had said that he had gone off into the deserts and the dunes where he liked to relax and meditate. So out in California where he lived. So you had him going into the dunes. You had the political turmoils that were going on around the world. You had different religion influences on this book. And not to mention other influences that we're not really going to get into, but you get the idea.
Well, that brings us to a next question. So she's done this test and she says, all right, you've been able to pass this test. Now, the reason he was able to pass this test was because of something called the Litany Against Fear, which I will direct you, if you have this version of the novel, the Ace Science Fiction 25th Anniversary Edition. On page 8, down at the very bottom, the last paragraph, it has the Litany Against Fear. And it says, when there is no more fear, there's only going to be me. I'm only going to be the one that's here. I'm going to take my fear. I'm going to look at it head on. I'm going to face it, and I'm going to let it come into me, and I'm going to see it as it is, and then I'm going to turn away from it because the fear is going to be gone because I'm able to control myself. I'm able to control my basic instincts. So we finally learn that Paul is able to control his basic instincts. And then finally, after another page of going through this pain, he finally passes the test and he says, he's sweating, he's trembling, he's unable to, believe that he's gone through this. And this woman says, no woman child has ever withstood this much pain. So right there, right from the beginning, you get the idea that he's sort of special.
Right, that he wasn't the only one that went through this test. And he can now breathe a sigh of relief that he knows, well, yeah, I know I'm human, but, I didn't give in to the basic animal instincts that this space witch, for lack of a better term, you know, thought that I was going to do.
Right. So she says, someday you may have to do this with your own child. You know, you may have to stand outside this door with your own child and let them go through this test. You know, so that's another question of the future. Like, is he going to continue on with this whole humanity test, or is this just a cruel game that continues on? What is the purpose of testing for these humans? What do you think the purpose is in testing for humans?
It's almost as if they're trying to weed out the weak ones and just want the strong ones for whatever their game is. What is their end game that they're trying to get at? You know, what are they trying to prove here?
Well, that's the one thing that comes up here. I mean, you've got these group of women who have been searching for this creature or person called the Kwisatz Haderach. And she explains on page 13 that there is a specific drug. They never go into what it is, but there's a specific drug that these women take in order to be able to tell a truth. You know, if someone's telling a truth or not, or if something's being valid, you know. So they take this drug and they go into what's called a truth trance, and they're able to tell whether or not something is going to happen, that yes, this person is telling the truth, so on or so forth.
So it's like a truth serum.
Right, but it says it gives insight. It gives insight into the user's mind. And it says that the drug is dangerous, you know, because the truth sayer who's had this drug is able to look inside their memories, their genetic memories of their body.
Why would someone want to do that?
That's the question. Why would someone want to look down all of these avenues? And the thing is that only females so far have been able to do it. There's been no man that is able to do it.
But he's done it. He passed the test at least.
But he only passed the humanity trial. He didn't pass this truth trance drug.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because it says, you know, we're looking for this person who could be many places at once. This person who's male, who's able to look down both male and female avenues. But mostly we want to look down the male avenues because we can't see some place that he can. It terrifies us. So what do you think is so scary in this genetic memory that they need a man to be able to see it?
That's a good question. It could be anything. It could be, was there a man involved in the past? Or is there going to be a man involved in the future that's going to be the downfall of this Bene Gesserit or Space Witch group, so to speak? Are they looking for someone to protect them? You know, is he going to be some sort of weapon? You know, if he's the only male versus all these female, like, okay, is he going to be used, you know, as a breeding source? Are they going to use his DNA? We don't know any of this yet.
Right, because it was saying that the Bene Gesserit have been breeding royal houses to royal houses using the females that they have in their order, the special order. And it's saying, for example, you know, he's wondering, well, okay, you're looking for these special humans. Why doesn't my mother know her parentage? You know, why doesn't my mother know who she is as far as where she comes from? And she says, well, we might have wanted to breed you to a close relative to establish a genetically dominant trait. So they're trying over how many thousands of years to find this person using genetic breeding.
So they're sprinkling the breadcrumbs out there. You know, they're answering his questions, but they're not answering his questions. Yeah, I know this is such a mind game here, if you think about it, because like, okay, you're asking these witches, and yes, I'm calling them witches, but you're asking them, hey, why am I so special? Why me? Why not my mother? Now, if you're telling me that I'm so special, okay, what's in it for me? What am I getting out of this? Well, you see, you're special because you're the only man that's gone through the tests. And
Well, he's not the only man that's gone through it.
He doesn't know that, though.
Yeah, but she tells him. She tells him right at the end, many men have tried this drug. We're looking for the Kwisatz Haderach. Many men have tried this drug, so many, but none have succeeded.
So what's in it for me? Almost like you're telling me that there's something in my DNA that's been altered. Why didn't I know about this before?
And that's the thing. Do they tell these people from the beginning that they're being trained? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
And he says, they tried and failed, all of them. And she says, oh no. Gaius Helen Moham says, oh no, they tried this and they died. So there really is no advantage for Paul here that I'm seeing. He's sort of just put in this role from the very beginning.
He's thrown into the... It's almost like you're being... going from the frying pan into the fire, because you're like, okay, you're getting thrown into this role, not really having a choice other than, all right, you're still alive after this test, so yeah, you must be the one since you passed the first test.
Well, there's a possibility.
Right.
There's a possibility. Who knows how many other potential things that they may have going on. I mean, they're an order who have been around for thousands of years. Kind of makes sense that he wouldn't be all of their eggs in one basket.
Right. Who knows? They might have, a dozen or so other, or hundreds of other candidates that they've got lined up. If he fails, well, you know what? We're just going to get the next one up in line.
And now we're moving, after this test, we're moving from Arrakis, from Caladan to go to Arrakis, and there's not much time. And in the meantime, there's another family that's introduced. So
dun, dun.
I know. We not only have Paul and his mother Jessica, we have his father, the Duke Leto Atreides, and they're part of this house called House Atreides. And then there's this other house that's introduced, House Harkonnen.
And don't worry, listeners, we are going to get into both House Atreides and House Harkonnen in the next episode.
Right? So stay tuned to that.
Absolutely.
All right. So this was our first podcast read-through of chapters 1 to 3. We did not get into chapter 2 or 3 because we had so much fun just trying to analyze chapter 1, and that's the way of the thing.
That's how the spice rolls. All right, guys. So once again, every Sunday night, we're going to be posting new episodes. So please tune in. And with that, guys, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Ashley.
Have a good night.